Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and today we're doing something a little bit different because it is May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's also Mental Health Awareness Week, at least in the UK that is. And May is also, specifically, Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Month. So this is what I want to talk about today, to raise awareness, as they say. And just before we go into any detail and I say anything more, just as a reminder, in case you didn't get the opening or skipped it or I don't know, please only watch this if you feel like you're up to it. I'm gonna discuss many different things regarding mental illness, borderline personality disorder naturally, but also about depression, anxiety, and yes, there will also be mention of self-harm and suicide. So please make sure you feel in the right state of mind to watch this before you continue. And if you don't, it's completely okay to pause the video, come back later, or don't watch it at all. I'm putting this out there to raise awareness for people who might not know a whole lot about borderline personalities or who are curious to learn about it, what it's like. For people who maybe have borderline or BPD in short, and want to maybe feel understood or just hear someone else talk about it. Variety of reasons, but yeah, just make sure that you feel like you're up to it before you continue. Okay, so I thought for a while about how I want to do this and I wasn't really sure how, so I decided to basically structure this based on the characteristics for borderline personality disorder. So there are a couple of main characteristics. I decided to go with the main, I think it's nine points of characteristics that serve as symptoms, or you have to sort of fulfill in order to get a diagnosis for BPD. I think you have to fulfill 5 out of the 9 criteria in order to be diagnosed with this. So that's what I'm sort of basing this whole thing on. We're going to go through the most common criteria for BPD, and I'll tell you about my experience with them to sort of give you an insight into what it's like for me, specifically for me. I'm not saying that this is what it's like for everyone who is BPD. I want to be very clear here that this is only my personal experience. This is just what I can tell you about what my life has been like with BPD. And there are many different kinds of people and different kinds of BPD, so to speak, which I will probably also come back to in some of these points I'll discuss. So maybe a short history before we dive into some details. I've been struggling with mental illness for about 6 years now. It started back in 2015 when I started with university, actually. And, it was all a bit new for me. I moved out of my parents' place, and I sort of had to be on my own for the first time in my life and do adulting, that sort of thing. And very basically speaking, I wasn't very good at handling it, which at first I didn't really realize. It took me until like about a year later. So I started developing symptoms and problems of mental illness when I was 18 years old. That's late 2015, but I didn't really realize I had problems until late 2016, which was mainly me realizing, okay, being sad or feeling nothing at all for over 6 months now is probably not normal. And this sort of all spiraled out of control. I had a lot of anxiety to deal with as well, especially social anxiety, which, as you can imagine, is not great when you start at university and go to all these new classes and have to meet new people and have to get along with your co-eds. Not nice, not easy. And it's all sort of spiraled out of control. until in 2017 I spoke to to the therapist that works at our university, so sort of counselor. And I told her about my problems, and we got to talking for a couple of weeks, and she offered me to actually go into therapy and have a stay at a hospital for a while. And at first I thought, I don't need that. I don't need to go to a hospital. I mean, I know I have problems, but I don't have to go to a hospital for therapy. But what basically made me change my mind the first time I thought about suicide. And I very vividly remember that I had this thought of suicide for the first time, very consciously. And I said, shit, this is a problem. So I spoke to the therapist again, and she signed me up for this stay at the hospital. And so I was 20 years old at the time. I went to hospital for almost 3 months. And that's where, I found out a lot of stuff about myself. And this is also where I encountered BPD and talked about my therapist there at the hospital about that. Basically, you sort of have a bit of a personality test while I was there, and she analysed it and all those things. And during a session, she said, you might want to look into borderline personality disorder. You look into that, and then we'll talk about it the next time. And I sort of did my own research with the documents she'd given me, and I was like, holy shit, that explains so much. And then I had the next session with her, and we talked about it, and that's how I was diagnosed. That's how I found out that these issues I have actually do have a name. That's not just depression and anxiety. And yeah, since then I've been living with it, struggling with it, more or less working with it. And this is where we are now in 2021. So how about we go into some of the first criteria, and I'll tell you about it. Also, it's very hard sometimes to express myself talking about this sort of stuff, since, if you're mentally ill in the head, it's sort of hard to describe feelings that only happen inside of your brain. But since I'm also an avid writer and also have been journaling for 2 years now, I may or may not occasionally read some stuff to you that I wrote during very upsetting times that I think will help to sort of demonstrate to you these feelings I'm trying to express. So occasionally you might hear me reading some poetry or some journal entries I wrote over the years that I think showcase these symptoms I'm talking about. But that's a whole lot of introduction. So let's get on with it. Okay, so the first criteria here, and I'm pretending I did not copy paste this from Wikipedia, is intense or uncontrollable emotional reactions and rapidly shifting between different emotional states. So this is probably the tagline for borderline personality disorder: uncontrollable emotional reactions and rapid shifts in our moods, which is, I think, the tagline for a reason. This is certainly something I experience almost on a daily basis, and it's very weird to describe. It basically, like, you're having emotions, but you're having too much emotions.
My emotions! My emotions!
I feel everything in a very, very extreme way. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme. Like, I react to certain things in ways that really don't need to be reacted to in such a way. For example, I cry very easily when I'm on my own. And some of the weirdest things in my life have made me cry. Best example, yesterday, and I'm not kidding, I cried watching Sesame Street. I don't know why. I just sat there and was full of nostalgia watching Sesame Street, and then I saw Big Bird, and I thought, this bird is so good and precious and so wholesome, and I cried. I cried for straight up 30 minutes just watching Sesame Street. So that's the thing. It's often, very often, these little things, you could say, that trigger these very emotional or very extreme reactions. So a minor inconvenience, or what someone would call a minor inconvenience, to me immediately becomes the worst thing in the world. Like, I can't take it on. I can't deal with it. The slightest inconvenience, the slightest problem, my mind immediately goes like, shit, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I will never ever be able to deal with this. I might as well die. These are the kinds of reactions I have to tiny problems in my life. And it's so weird because I've never realized that this is a problem when I was younger. I've always thought or at least in the past couple of years before I was diagnosed, I thought, yeah, I guess I'm an emotional person. Like, I cry a lot while watching movies, for example. I have very intense relationships, for example, with fictional characters. Not even with the real people in my life, but with fictional characters on telly. Or while reading books, or just with tiny things happening around me, and I have such a strong opinion or such a strong feeling about them, and I never thought that was a thing. Like, I always thought, yeah, sure, I'm a bit emotional, but lots of people get emotional about stuff, right? Yeah, but then not everyone cries while watching the SpongeBob musical last year. Now, it's already exhausting enough to feel emotions as strongly as someone like me does. Like, on a scale from 1 to 10, me feeling emotions is a 500. And I'm not exaggerating. That's what it feels like. And what's even more exhausting is that you have these constant mood swings almost all the time. Which doesn't mean, I feel sad on a Monday and, on Wednesday I feel happy again. No, that means going from happy to angry to frustrated to feeling lonely to feeling suicidal to feeling happy again in the span of 10 minutes. Yes, and this feels absolutely exhausting once you realize what's actually happening. So I'm trying to think of an example. I remember a day, it was a while ago. I was feeling relatively okay that day, and I was sitting at my desk watching a movie or something, and I felt really happy. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting into it. This is cool. I'm just having a relaxing afternoon. Then I accidentally spilled my drink. It was just water. It wasn't even the whole drink. It was just a bit of water on the desk. I went absolutely haywire. I had to pause the movie. I slammed the glass down on the table and was completely thinking, I was like, oh, fucking hell, what happened now? I gotta clean everything up. And I ran to the kitchen, tried to get a mop and clean it all up. And I was angrily trying to clean my desk, and then I got super frustrated because I was like, oh, you're such a moron, you're such an idiot, why does this kind of stuff keep happening to you? It's because you're such a clumsy asshole. Then that kind of thing starts in your head, and you're thinking, yeah, because you're completely useless, you might as well not clean up. How about you just throw this thing across the room, you throw the sponge or the mop or whatever across the room, and then the frustration spirals fast into depression because you're feeling, yeah, I'm useless. This kind of stuff keeps happening to me all the time because I'm a worthless piece of shit. Then you're on the floor, you're sliding down the wall, sit on the floor, depressed, crying, just just crying because it feels like everything in the world is crashing down on you, that you can't handle it. And it's sort of apathy sets in, and I become quiet, and nothing. At this point, there's absolutely nothing, absolute emptiness. There's just nothing. There's just apathy, and you're realizing, oh, everything is empty, and then you realize, oh, you're feeling lonely. You're always on your own. This kind of stuff always happens because you're on your own. And then that sets in, the loneliness. And then, in a weird way, I remember I started laughing. It was this very manic, upsetting kind of laugh where I was like, well, why even think about it? This is stupid, this is ridiculous. Just don't think about it. It is weird. Just, come on, get up. And you get up and you do your laugh and you clean up and you put the glass down and you sit back at the desk and I continue watching the movie. This happened in the span of 5 minutes. All of these moods can happen in the span of 5 minutes. And it is so exhausting and so tiring, and you don't even realize it until this sort of episode is over. And what's even scary about this is that you often can't predict it happen. Like, it very often just happens out of nowhere. So I will very often feel completely okay or, content, and I'm fine with what's going on, and then something will happen. This can be like, I don't know, someone's ringing my doorbell and I don't know who it is. That can be someone is sending me a text message that I don't like. That can be I'm getting, I don't know, a task from my employer out of nowhere, and this immediately switches everything. And when I say immediately, I mean immediately. It's like almost as if there's a person who flips a switch and it goes from, oh, I'm fine, to fucking hell, shut your mouth. No joking, this is what it's like. And I absolutely hate it, because now I'm at this point in my journey, or whatever you want to call it, where I often realize this is happening. Where I'm realizing, okay, no, calm down. This is not the appropriate reaction to what is happening. The switch. It's trying to be flipped, and I'm sort of more aware of it at this point. The problem is, it makes it even worse when you become aware of it, because you can't shut it off. You're like, okay, I know this is happening, but it has to happen. I can't shut it off. This needs to come out. And it's like a constant roller coaster of emotions, up and down, up and down. And you can imagine that this is quite exhausting if this happens to you almost every single day. Speaking of intense emotions, this brings us to our second point: inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, which I think is another popular or famous tagline for borderline personality disorder. All of us are incredibly angry and like to be very violent or shit like that. Now, while it is very much true that a lot of people with BPD experience anger very strongly, this is sort of a stereotype that BPD people are uncontrollable, manipulative, and violent, and lash out and that sort of thing. And while that stuff can happen, like BPD people can lash out, and sometimes these mood swings can become very extreme, especially if it's something that happens externally. Anger is something that I know can seem very intimidating and scary at times. And that's it. Anger for me personally is definitely something I deal with a lot. It's definitely one of the emotions I have the hardest time controlling. I always say I get angry very easily, which explains it a lot now that I think about it. I always said that I get angry very easily. Which again has to do with these mood swings and has to do with the slightest of inconveniences happening to me, and I'm completely overreacting. Especially, for example, in my class, in my university classes, it would very often happen that I become extremely angry or frustrated because of a minor thing my teacher said, or some of the other students have said or done. And it doesn't just annoy me, it ignites a flame of wrath inside of me that comes out as soon as I'm home and I know I'm, in my own private space and I won't bother anyone. But when I'm angry, shit's flying through this room. I scream a lot, I shout a lot, I say the most horrible insults to myself, to other people. Very often I'm glad when my flatmate isn't home to hear me say this kind of stuff. And it's just me walking up and down in this room here, basically having an argument with myself, even though I'm shouting at, I don't know, my classmate who's not here. And I admit, if someone were to see me when that happens, I could imagine this is quite scary. But that's where this other thing comes in that I mentioned earlier, that there are different types of people with BPD, or different types of BPD. The sort of stereotype is that a lot of this stuff happens externally, that, we throw stuff and we shout at people, that sort of thing. But quiet BPD is very much a thing where a lot of this stuff happens internally, which is partly true for me. The thing is, I'm only very expressive about my emotions, or especially my anger, when I know I'm on my own, because then I know I can just let it out. No one's gonna hear me. No, I'm not bothering anyone with this. I very rarely show my mood swings or let my mood swings take over visually, or I very rarely allow myself to be angry in front of other people, because I don't want to show them that, because I feel like this is something that's happening inside of me, which sometimes is even more difficult to deal with because you don't have an outlet, and all of this roller coaster stuff is happening inside of you and you don't want to let it out. This is actually a point where I would like to read something. It's from an old journal of mine. I've been journaling since I think April, May 2019 now, like on a more or less regular basis. I've tried journaling in the past, but I'm not very good at keeping up this constant journaling. And there are always considerable gaps in between entries, I will say that. But like I said, more or less on a constant basis. This is from, I don't know, like early 2020. And I think it's a good example of how angry I get about small things. And I got angry because I wrote in all caps, my friends. And I think I was upset about something my teacher had said. Well, I had to give a presentation on it. It had something to do with Charles Darwin. And I had to give a presentation. And I got really upset about something the teacher said. And you can tell in these words that I was having a way too strong a reaction for, just something your teacher comments on. I had to work on that stupid presentation for that fucking wanker. I have a hard time not wanting to scream at him the moment he opens his mouth. I have no idea what he wants from me. After talking for 20 minutes about Darwinist themes in a film, he asks me how this is a Darwinist film. Like, bitch, did you not fucking listen? What the fuck do you want from me? I worked my ass off over the weekend and he still makes me feel like I achieved fucking bullshit. Apart from half the class not turning up for my presentation after I had to listen to all their stupid bullshit. Fuck them. Fuck everyone. I'm just done. I'm fucking done with everything. I'm so exhausted. It feels like I'm feeling nothing and everything at the same time. I just can't anymore. I'm done with this. I'm done with this fucking torture that is human existence. Nothing good can come from this. So yeah, this is all me. This is all me, and I hope you had a lot of fun with that dramatic reading of my own emotions. Okay, let's talk about the next thing, which is chronic feelings of emptiness. So this is hard to talk about because how do you talk about emptiness? How do you talk about feeling empty? Now, I know this is maybe also sort of common for people who have depression, which I have as well, when sometimes it's not being sad that upsets you, it's just that feeling of feeling absolutely nothing, that you're feeling numb. And if you have had this sort of experience, it's very similar to that. The thing is just it's very hard to point out what it actually is, because how do you describe a chronic feeling of emptiness? It's just a very often, especially in the when you have those mood swings and you have these episodes and you reach this point of apathy where it honestly feels like there is nothing. There's absolutely nothing. You're not feeling upset, you're not feeling sad, you're not feeling angry, you're not having anything. It's just empty. It's just absolutely empty. And it's sort of cliche to describe that there is this hole, this black hole inside of your mind. But this is very much what it is. And it's weird to describe that, you have this hole, this darkness inside of you, and nothing can fill it. And that's what's the burden, even though it's nothing. It's just the absence of everything is what's so unbearable. It's so hard to put into words, and I know I have marked something down for reading that expresses this maybe a bit better. But just imagine that you don't have anything. You have this feeling for hours and hours during the day, for weeks and months, in your head that tells you there's nothing. There's just nothing. There is no purpose in life. There are no emotions. There is nothing worth it. Not your family, no friends, no meaning in anything. It's just a blank slate. And there is something, that there is something inside of your brain where you're thinking, there is nothing. It's a black hole, and I have absolutely no idea what would fill this hole. There's just nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I remember during one of my first sessions with my therapist at the hospital, she asked me, what would have to change for you in order for you to say, okay, I have improved. This is now better for me. And I had no answer, because I felt like that, I don't know, because everything is just empty up here. I don't know why it's empty. I don't know what can fill the emptiness. I just don't know. So I don't know what would have to change. So maybe this is a good point to read another journal entry to you, since this is very much always in the moment when I write this. So this maybe explains it a bit better. Also, I have something else I can read you, poetry, which is also very much always written in the moment when I compose poetry. So this is a journal entry from very early. This is when I started journaling, from 2019, early 2019. And I think it very much describes not only this general feeling of just feeling absolutely worthless, which I guess is a general depression feeling, but also it goes into this emptiness I feel a lot. So maybe to give this as a sort of impression on what this can feel like. I wasn't meant to be a part of this society. To everyone and everything, I'm just a pawn, the one who's the most insignificant and unimportant figure that only moves to die first so others can walk over my corpse. That's my role in this life. A fly and nothing more. I don't belong anywhere, and everyone makes sure that I won't forget. Even when I'm trying to socialize and attend social gatherings, there's nothing for me there. Things I used to love bear no meaning anymore, and the people around me don't realize that I'm empty inside and can't see why they are smiling at the miserableness that is human existence. What do you do to escape this emptiness? Is it even empty for you? I'd give everything just to feel something besides this empty pain. Even my wounded flesh does nothing for me anymore. It's only a short sensation to remind myself that I have a fraction of control left. At least this is pain I can see and feel. Doesn't matter if I'm responsible and people consider it tragic. It's the only real sensation I have, and I don't want it to be empty. I don't want to be empty and lonely forever. I can't keep doing this anymore. So yes, this also very much refers to the history I have in regards to self-harm, but we'll come back to that later. So I think this very much points out this constant dread I have. That is just why can't I have anything? Why does it always feel like that there's nothing? Why? It's very much again the sort of extreme that is either nothing or everything, and you're never in between. It's always one or the other. And maybe to illustrate this in a more well, I didn't want to say educated, in a more fancy way. I very much enjoy writing poetry. I always say I compose the best poetry either when I'm in love, which hasn't happened in a while, or when I'm depressed, which happens frequently. So that sort of makes the best poetry, and I very often, naturally, write about the things I feel or not feel in this case. And that's a poem I wrote a couple of months ago when I think I was supposed to meet up with someone and something went wrong and I was feeling very anxious, and then the emptiness started setting in, and I thought about why am I doing even any of this, what's even happening. And that's when I wrote this poem. There's nothing for me here, nothing to cherish, nothing to fear. Emptiness is my lonely friend, but even they are only sent by the one who seeks my soul, which is burned to a piece of coal, thrown into a blazing fire. It waits for me to tire, to surrender to numbing pain, made up of cuts and bloody rain running down my wasted flesh, until there's nothing more to do but crash my mortal shell in the abyss to find my last remaining bliss. And yes, I do get that dramatic every time I write poetry, so I get to enjoy that a bit more. But how about we move on to the next BPD characteristic? Unstable and chaotic interpersonal relationships, often characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation, also known as splitting. Which I think is another one of those characteristics more people are aware of, which also brings us back to this very much black and white thinking that not only goes on in things we deal with in day-to-day life and that happen to us, but very much also invade our personal relationships, which is something I didn't realize I was doing until my therapist started talking to me about BPD problems. And it's something I've since more and more realized I keep doing, and I'm now much more aware of it happening and trying to, shut it down when it happens. It's especially this alternating between idealization and devaluation that is, for me personally, a huge problem. Because again, it's like a switch that someone just... And I once tried to explain this to a friend by likening it to a scale, that all my friends and the people I know are sort of on a scale, and when they do something that I perceive as something very bad, they just immediately sort of slide down. And if this is me liking my friends or my family or whatever, and then this is me absolutely hating them. And remember, we're thinking in hardcore extremes here. So this is, you're the greatest person I have ever met in my entire life, and you're basically God. And this is, you're the fucking devil, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you ever again in my life. And yes, this happens. It happens with my family members, which I always regret when it happens with them. And it also happens with the best of my friends. Which, again, is something that mostly happens for me internally, because I never want to show that to them. And again, it is triggered by often minor inconveniences. For me, personally, it very often has to do with disappointment when they do something that I perceive as disappointing. Classic example, let's say you want to meet up, you have a date with someone. You say, okay, we're going to go and have coffee tomorrow, or how about we have a Zoom call tomorrow, that sort of thing. And then they say, yeah, sure, maybe I think I can put you in there. And you're thinking, oh yeah, cool, we're gonna see each other. And then a couple of hours later, you get the text message that says, oh, sorry, no, I can't meet up with you. I'll have to cancel. And that, for me, is the worst thing you could ever do. I'm gonna lose my fucking shit. So this goes from, oh yeah, I'm so excited to meet them. Oh, I haven't seen them in such a long time. And cool, we get to hang out and talk about stuff. Oh, I have so many cool things I want to talk to them about. And you get that message that says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do tomorrow. Maybe we'll do it another time. And you're thinking, how fucking dare you? How very much fucking dare you? You know what? Piss off, piss off. I didn't want to see you. I don't ever want to see you again in my life. You don't even have to talk to me. You're the fucking devil. And this happens so often with all kinds of people, and I hate myself for it happening. Because you're thinking, I love these people, I care about my friends, I care about my family. And then you have these thoughts about them where you're like, I'm gonna fucking murder you, you fucking devil. And it's just the worst, because you don't want to feel like that about someone you like or love. So this is very much what splitting is. It's basically, again, this extreme black and white thinking, but for people. You go from this is the greatest person I've ever met to this is the fucking devil. And the thing is, sometimes, especially if it happens externally and you show this to the people it's happening with, this can absolutely ruin relationships. It can absolutely ruin friendships. I've had friendships that at the time I thought were very good friendships fall away from me because I had this splitting experience with them, and it drove them away, and I never made up with them because part of me didn't want to, part of me felt too ashamed to admit that something was wrong, and part of me was just too afraid to talk to them again. But this can happen. Like, I remember having, that's years ago now, when I first started experiencing like emotional problems. And I told a friend about it, and like she had a bit of an overreaction, or what I perceived to be an overreaction. And she tried to like get me help. And was like, maybe you should go talk to someone, see a therapist. Please do be careful, that sort of thing. And I completely lost my shit. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Don't overreact. I'm not sick. Stop talking like that. And the problem is, I kept saying it. Like, she was just trying to help, which, I mean, maybe could have been a bit overbearing, but, you know, she was just trying to help. And in hindsight, she was probably right. But I was like, get the fuck away from me with all these recommendations and therapist talk. Don't fucking talk to me about this. And this, when so far I said, don't ever fucking talk to me ever again. I don't want to hear from you. And I didn't hear from her again. Just didn't happen. And it's just very frustrating because this happens a lot with people you like or you think you like. And the things that very often with people you're very enthusiastic about certain kinds of relationship. You know, there is, for example, this concept of a favorite person, which is a very frequent thing to happen with BBD people, that you have a favorite person. It doesn't even have to be like your best friend in real life. It doesn't have to be someone you very intimately know even in real life. Doesn't even have to be someone like you hang out with regularly. It's just someone in your life who you know, who you are aware of, and they are your absolute favorite person. In my eyes, they can do no wrong. They are basically Jesus. Like, they are holy to me. And like, everything they do is precious. Everything they say is the best thing that's ever been said. I want to be them. I'm so jealous of everything they do. They could do no wrong. They're like up here. They're like up here, motherfucker. They're up here. And this is this very extreme idealization that you have for them, that you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest person I've ever met. And this puts a lot of pressure on you, on the person, especially if they were aware of it, can you imagine? Which becomes even worse if you have a splitting experience with them. Imagine, because I had that. I had my favorite person, I had the splitting experience, and it fucking sucks. And for example, because I'm gonna read some horrible, horrible emotional poetry again to illustrate this. I had a friend who used to be at university with me, but then had to leave, and we didn't see each other a lot anymore. But I was always excited to meet them when they would come back, and I think one day I just got a message or something, and it upset me. It was a minor thing, but it very much upset me. It was basically like, oh, she met up with someone else instead of me, that sort of thing. And I felt betrayed. There's no other word to put it, especially since I called the poem Betrayal. So this sort of maybe helps to understand the feeling you have when splitting, or when splitting is happening, or personal relationships are invaded by PPD. From warm flesh into the light, I get taken to promises so bright, made by phantoms enchanting songs that separate my rights and wrongs. And as the years go idly by, the voices silently begin to die, as I seek them in this mortal chaos, losing all my mirth and heartful pathos. Many questions, answers only few, and yet the voices capture me anew, for me to hate and love them all the same. Only so I can desperately proclaim to not be stranded on this lifeless coast, waiting to be greeted by an empty ghost. Still their cold fingers come as a surprise, as they unveil their unfaithful disguise, to drag me into the eyes-piercing dark, where I am left to make another mark, to remind myself of the darkest art, which means to murder my most foolish heart. You can tell that I love poetry from the Romantic period and the Gothic period. You can tell I'm into that shit. And how about we go on to the next criteria, which is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. That was something I didn't realize I dealt with until I talked to the therapist at the hospital about it. To me, feeling lonely, the feeling of loneliness and the fear of abandonment are the biggest problems I deal with. I remember back when I started therapy at the hospital, and we did art therapy, and we had to draw our biggest fears. And I remember drawing myself in black and white, surrounded by people in colors. And I said, my greatest fear is being apart from everyone and being alone.
I hate when I can't hold in my loneliness. This crying's been happening too often, every other week now.
Which I had never realized up until that point, that this was a problem I dealt with, because I don't have a lot of friends. I have like 4 or 5 people I'm more or less close to, and I don't see them a lot. I mean, especially now nowadays during the pandemic, but even before, like I'm not the kind of person like regularly meets up with friends and people. I don't go out because I'm not that kind of person. Also, I have social anxiety. You can imagine my social interactions are very limited, which makes this whole fear of abandonment even bigger. Because you feel like you're all alone in the world with your problems, with the worries, with the emotions, with the moods. And you feel like no one is there. No one cares about you. Absolutely no one. And you're basically looking for people to stab you in the back. Like if you have friends and you feel like, oh yeah, I have relatively stable friendships, relationships with them, you're just basically waiting for them to abandon you. This is always something that is happening in the back of my mind. It's always like, when will they leave? When will they do something that will upset me? When will they realize that they don't actually like hanging out with me? When will they stab me in the back and leave? That's always in the back of my mind, always, with everyone, with my friends, even with my family. I'm like, yeah, they love me, but they only love me because they're supposed to love me. They wouldn't care if I didn't exist anymore. Which, no, they just hang around with me because they have to. It's very upsetting because it not only makes you question every social interaction, every relationship you have, no matter how intimate it is. It's also that for many people, not so much for me, but for many other people with BPD, is that you do everything to avoid the abandonment. You do absolutely everything. You're begging these people not to leave. If they do something that you perceive as something they do to get away from you. Can be the tiniest thing. Can be, for example, saying, "Oh, I can't meet up with you tomorrow. Let's do it next week." And your brain immediately thinks, "Oh no, they're abandoning me." I tell them, "Oh no, we can do whatever you like tomorrow. We can meet up at another place if you like, or please don't leave me. I don't want to be alone." That sort of thing. Like I said, this doesn't really happen to me a lot since I internalize a lot. A lot of these things happen internally. I very much do have this fear of abandonment, but I don't usually express it to other people, especially people it happens with. But it is certainly a very huge fear in my life that I'm scared of, that I will be alone, that you are left to your own devices, basically. Because yeah, I have social anxiety, and I'm very much an introvert, and I very much need a lot of alone time, and I'm fine. Like I always say, I'm fine being on my own. I like being alone. I don't like being lonely. That's always the difference. And to illustrate this, I have another journal entry for you. It's again from like spring 2019. I don't even really remember what was happening at the time. It's probably, again, just something that happened, like, I don't know, someone of my friends said something I didn't like, or someone cancelled an appointment, or I don't know, something like that. And the following was the journal entry for that day. I have come once more to the conclusion that no one gives a shit about anyone. Friends don't exist for me because they can't be bothered to make the effort to care about me, or can even pretend to give a flying fuck. In the end, they'll always leave or betray me, and honestly, I'm not even sure if I can blame them. Still, goes to show what kind of cunts everyone just really is. You don't hear from them for months, and they don't even make the effort to strike up a conversation, and if they do, it's only to tell me that they are abandoning me soon. Fuck them. Why did I even expect anything? Why do I even care if very obviously they don't? Friends don't exist in this world. Not for me. I'm doomed to have my greatest fear come true, and there's nothing to be done about it. Okay, moving on to the next bit. That is markedly disturbed sense of identity and distorted self-image. Okay, so here I have to say that this is not necessarily something I personally struggle with a lot. I do have my moments, naturally, I do. But from what I know, for a lot of people, this is struggling to tell who they are as a person, that you're very often unsure who you actually are. And I can kind of get behind that, because I also remember this especially being an issue when I was younger, in my teenage years, that I would very often think I'm made up of different identities, that there isn't one true me, but that there are different facades to me, and I decide who I want to present as. Which is something I even do now. It's something I struggle with, to sort of have this image of me as one person in my mind, and I often feel like I can be this kind of person, I can be this kind of person, or maybe I can be like this character from that TV show I saw. For me, which is weird, I know, but for me, very often these kinds of things are influenced by people I watch on telly, or in movies, or I read in books about it. Very often sort of constructed self-image I have, that I'm like, oh, I want to be like this person from that TV show because I think that is cool and I think I can do that. And then you start thinking, but is that actually me, or is that just something I enjoy about that character? And that much am I just projecting? I don't know. But this can also extend to things like, sexuality, gender identity, that sort of thing, which again isn't something I personally struggle with that much. It's those kinds of things are something I'm very sure about. But again, you do. At least I occasionally get these moments when you're like, but is that actually true? Like, for example, with my sexuality. For people who watch my channel probably know that I'm asexual, which is something I've been very sure about for years now. But then, it comes to stuff like romantic attraction, and I've always thought, well, you're pan-romantic, you're always into people, but then you sort of start thinking about it and you think, but is that actually true? Can you call yourself that? You don't really have the romantic experience to call yourself that. Do you even really fall for people in that way? Which is very weird. Because, of course, naturally, this is also part of just figuring things out for yourself, naturally. But again, for BPD people, it's very extreme, that sort of thing. And this was a realization I had only a couple of months ago. It's something, for example, for me, is also very much connected to these extreme emotions I have. Because I realized that in my childhood, in my teenage years, I would very often, very easily fall in love with people. Like, I had frequently crushes on people in my class back when I was younger, and I would say, oh, I'm really into this guy at the moment, I think I love him, or oh my god, I think I love this girl, she's so cool. And I would always immediately go to, I'm in love with this person. I'm like, and imagine I'm like 13 years old, I have no idea actually. And this is sort of something I realize now later, I'm like, but did you actually have romantic feelings for these people? Or was that just me imagining I can be a romantic person because that's sort of what you think it is? And again, that's sort of the emotions becoming very extreme because you think, oh, this person's nice to me. I think they're nice. I'm in love with them. That's immediately the sort of jump. So you see this all sort of goes together in a weird way. But like I said, so the distorted self-image isn't necessarily a problem I deal with a lot, but it's definitely a problem for a lot of other people with BPD. Okay, so the next one is transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. So I occasionally have what can be called a dissociative episode. I do occasionally get dissociative moments. And how I always describe this is I'm having a zombie day. For me, this is always like feeling like a zombie. You're just walking through your day, absolutely mindless. You have no idea what's actually happening to you. You're not perceiving anything that's actually happening to you. You're on autopilot. Your mind is either somewhere completely else or completely empty. And you don't even really realize what you're doing. Like I remember doing a therapy session back when I was staying at the hospital, and we were getting into like a discussion I wasn't entirely comfortable with, and it went on for like an hour or so, or even longer into the second therapy session. And then it was lunchtime, and I noticed after a while I was bleeding on my arm. And I looked at my hands and I realized, I had scratched myself. And I had no idea that it had been happening. Because I was so out of it. I wasn't paying proper attention to the therapy that was going on. I was just somewhere completely else, just like mind fog. And I was absentmindedly doing something to myself that I didn't even realize I was doing. No idea. And dissociative episodes can be scary sometimes because, like I said, sometimes you're not even aware of what's actually going on, and you're sort of there in the moment and you're waiting for it to just be over. It's like you're in a dream. You can't get out of it. You can't get out of it. You can't really like wake up. You're just wait for it. You just wait for the feeling to be done, and it's just you walking around, going through your day, and sometimes you just don't know how you got there at the end of it. You just don't know. I think I have a reference for that in my journal. Yeah. So again, this is 2019, early journal days. And I wrote about this, not feeling like I know what I'm doing. I'm running on autopilot. The day ends and I honestly don't know how I have done enough to fill the last 14 hours. It feels like I'm anything and nothing all at once. Despite that, I seem to be unable to control myself or my emotions. I started crying today out of nowhere and without proper reason. I suppose loneliness is catching up on me in the most unfortunate and unexpected of moments. I hate it when I can't hold in my loneliness. Anyway, there isn't much to be done about it. I'm alone. Yeah, so that's what this is. This, which to me personally is very much connected, again, as you also heard in the journal entry, to this feeling of emptiness, which basically, in my case, tends to take over in these dissociative episodes, and you're just sort of doing your thing, and at the end of the day, you're lying in bed and you're thinking, what have I even done? You're thinking, I probably had breakfast. I probably had a cup of tea, because there's stuff standing on my desk. There's a mug. The kitchen looks like I have used it, but you don't really are aware of it happening. Okay, we move on to the next criteria, which is impulsive or reckless behaviour. For example, impulsive or uncontrollable spending, unsafe sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. This is something I'm personally very much unsure about if this is actually something I struggle with. Definitely not in the more stereotypical way, because I don't drink, I don't have sex, and I'm asexual, so there's no really desire for that to happen anyway. I don't drive. I don't really have a lot of money to allow unreasonable spending, which I'm glad I'm aware of, that this is something I can't afford. I guess binge eating happens to me sometimes. I very often get cravings when I'm having bad moments, and I get cravings that I just want to eat. I just need something. And which is especially bad if you have something unhealthy in the house. Then all the snacks disappear. If I know there are snacks in the house and I'm having an episode, these snacks are gone within 10 minutes. But I know that this is very much a common problem for a lot of BPD people. If you have an episode and you currently happen to drive a car on the motorway or something, then you suddenly start driving very fast, just because you feel like you have to express this reckless feeling. It's very much impulsive. I guess I said I don't drink, but I remember one time that would maybe count as an example here is that I had an argument or something with a friend, and I was very, very upset about it. And I went home, and there's a supermarket not far from where I live. And I went to the supermarket and I bought like 4 or 5 bottles of alcohol. It wasn't even very strong alcohol, because, like I said, I don't really drink. But I bought it because I knew this can make me drunk if I wanted to. And I bought it, I went home, and I drank 4 bottles of alcohol. And I wasn't full on drunk. I don't think so. I was tipsy. I could definitely feel that something was going on, which for me is already more than enough. Like I said, I don't usually drink. But this, I guess, is sort of an example where, again, you have this very impulsive behavior to something, because you're overreacting to something that's happening to you. And this can become very, very, very risky, especially if it's something like, for example, driving a car, or you have uncontrollable spending, that sort of thing. You have very bad impulses that you want to do something to yourself, which is actually something which is going to come up very soon. Again, it's sort of like a switch is being flipped and you suddenly need to do something about it, and the only way to express it is to do something very, very reckless, to something extreme, because remember, for BPD people, it's always extreme. It's either nothing or everything. Okay, and this brings us to our last criteria, which is recurrent suicidal gestures and or self-harm. And this is where I, again, want to point out, if you don't feel up to it, it's okay to pause the video and move on to something else, because all of the stuff we've had up until now is heavy, but now comes the real heavy shit. So this is something I very much struggle with, in case you couldn't tell. If I've had a history with self-harm and suicidal thoughts before I even knew I was A, mentally ill, and B, had BPD. I've been self-harming on and off for almost 6 years now. It also sort of started in late 2015 when I started university. And the first time it happened, in my case, it was for very silly reasons. It was just me thinking, why not just try it? I don't know, this is a thing people do. Why not just try it, see what it feels like? I wasn't even, or at least I didn't realize at the time that I was having problems. I just thought, I don't know, let's just do that thing. That's a thing people do, and I don't know. It's a very weird explanation. I can't even really explain what was going on in my head. I can't. It was just me thinking, I'm curious, let's do it. And I thought that was the end of it. I was like, I don't self-harm, that's not a thing I do. Just forget about it. And I was fine until, the major depressive episode set in a couple of months later. And I vividly remember the day it happened for the first time, like properly. I was at a birthday party, and I don't go to parties. I don't do well with parties. I have social anxiety. You can imagine me at a university birthday party. Not great. Way too many people. I felt super uncomfortable, and I basically didn't know anyone who was there. And I went home feeling absolutely devastated. I felt so bad about myself. I felt bad about everything. I had about 4 panic attacks that day. And I felt sad and angry and frustrated and embarrassed. And there was so much going on inside of it. And remember, everything dialed up to 5,000. And I remember taking a knife from the kitchen, and I cut my shoulder. Because I thought this is an outlet. For me, it's very often an outlet for the pain I'm feeling inside of here. Because you're thinking, this isn't real, this isn't visible, this is something people can't see. But if you hurt yourself, this is something you can see, this is something I can point to and say, this is what hurts me. And this is where it started for me. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, especially if you don't know about self-harm, if you don't know someone who self-harms, if you are not familiar with it at all, it is very much like an addiction. You're thinking, I've done it once just to deal with shit, and that's fine. It's very hard to get rid of again, because it becomes a coping mechanism. And it's a very unhealthy coping mechanism, as you can imagine. Because your psyche basically thinks, anytime you feel upset or angry or sad about anything, it doesn't even have to be like a major episode. It can only be like you're feeling upset about this tiny thing. Hurt yourself. Because your brain is like, this is what makes you feel better. This is what you did last time, right? And for me, the problem is it became a regular thing. And your body or your psyche at some point becomes used to it, which is very weird to explain. Because you're thinking you're hurting yourself to, because the pain takes some of the psychological pain away, and the pain also sort of distracts from other things that are going on. The thing is, as the more often you do it, the quicker you get familiar with it, and the more you get used to it. And then and at some point, which I realize sounds weird and it's hard to explain, and I know it's hard to listen to. For me, very often it's like, I did this, I know I'm doing it, but it doesn't even really help because it doesn't hurt anymore, because you've gotten so used to it. But it becomes a coping mechanism you just can't get rid of. It becomes your immediate impulse to deal with almost anything that is happening to you. And there are so many different kinds of self-harm. Obviously, cutting is the most, the one people know about the most. But there's also like burning yourself, hitting yourself. Again, this sort of impulsive, reckless behaviour that you get drunk on purpose, that you go and have sex with someone, that sort of thing. Which a lot of people don't realise that there are many different kinds of ways that people hurt themselves. Because it doesn't even necessarily have to be physical pain, it can also be psychological pain. And the thing is, you go out of your way to do it. Because once this has become a coping mechanism to you, you go out of your way to be able to do it whenever possible. So at university, I would know I can do it if I don't know, just scratch myself during lessons, or I can take the pin from my backpack and use the needle on there to scratch myself, that sort of thing. Or what also happens very often is, for me, especially when I'm having one of these anger episodes, that I punch the wall and my doors a lot, very hard, and then my hand hurts for a couple of days. Luckily, it's never been broken. But that sort of thing. I've smashed my head against the wall because I know I get headaches very easily. And it's a cycle that is very hard to get out of. I have, admittedly, while I'm still struggling with it, I would argue, become better at dealing with it, where it isn't something I do on a regular basis. Because when I first started, it became something I did every day, sometimes twice a day. And every single day I would hurt myself, and this would go on for weeks and months, every single day. Sometimes nothing even would happen during the day. It was a completely fine day, but I would come home and hurt myself just because it has become such a routine. And it's very scary because it very often feels like you're losing control over what's happening, or you use it as a mechanism to keep control over what's happening. The feeling, I'm losing control over my mind, over my emotions. Let's do this, focus it on this one thing, and that's it, and that's the outlet. But it becomes scary when you realize, or come to this point where you're thinking, this isn't something I have to do, but I'm doing it anyway. Why am I doing it? Why am I doing something so extreme over basically nothing? And this is very, in many ways, sort of a culmination of all of these problems we discussed earlier. That, when you become upset, when you become angry, when you feel lonely, when you feel abandoned, that this is what a lot of people do, or a lot of BPD people do, to create an outlet, to create something they can point to and say, this is what hurts me, or this distracts me from the other pain I feel, or a variety of other reasons. It's hard to get into, I guess I'm only speaking for myself here, naturally. And unfortunately, this is something that can, like the criteria says, also resolve in suicidal gestures, which is something I have dealt with as well. I already mentioned earlier, that was sort of what got me into therapy the first time. In 2017, I realized, I very vividly remember, it was a day, it was like the day before I had therapy with the therapist from my university. And I was having a very, very, very bad day. I had to go to class, and my parents weren't home. I couldn't call them. They were on holiday or something. And I just sat It was in public. I just sat there crying and thinking, I can't deal with this. I don't want to be here anymore. And I remember the dissociation sort of starting to set in, and I started walking. And I remember standing, waiting for the traffic light to go green so I could cross the street, and the cars came sort of rushing by. And I thought, just take a step forward, step in front of the car, and it's all over. Just take that step, and the car will hit you, and it's done. And that was very scary to have this as a conscious thought inside my head. And I was so scared because it felt so real. And I was so scared that I would act on this impulse. And the next day I saw the therapist and said, you have to put me into hospital. I thought about suicide yesterday. You have to put me in the hospital right now, otherwise something might happen. And that is something I'm still very much struggling with. I'm very much afraid of. I'm in general very much afraid of losing control in general. And this is like the peak. This is the ultimate. This is the ultimate fear that one day I won't be able to hold back. That one day you give in to this impulse. And there have been many days that I stood at the traffic light and I thought, just take a step forward. There are so many times when I'm waiting for my train and I'm thinking, just step in front of the train. It's over. There are many times that I stand in my open window frame. I live on the 4th floor and I'm looking down. I'm standing in the open frame, just standing and thinking, looking down. This is high enough, right? This is, I can do this. This is high enough. And then you just stand there for minutes and hours and you're just waiting for the feelings to go away. And you wait for everything to just be over. And it's very scary. It's very scary if anyone who's ever dealt with depression knows that this feeling of being afraid to lose control is scary, especially when it comes to self-harm and suicidal gestures and thoughts. And just like with self-harm, suicidal thoughts can spiral out of control very quickly. Like I remember sort of early on, when I realized I had problems, I was self-harming, and I thought, yeah, it's bad, but it's not that bad. I don't want to die. I'm fine, and I'm not cutting anywhere dangerous. And then jump cut to a year later. I'm certainly cutting in places that would be very dangerous if I ever decided to do something. And jump cut to a couple of months later, I'm thinking about walking into traffic. And the scary thing is that, again, you have these kinds of reactions to things that really don't deserve that kind of reaction. And it's very much something you do in order to deal with all of the extreme emotions. And it's just very difficult to put into words, which is why I'm going to read some words, namely to sort of close this off maybe as a last poem, which is an older one actually, which I think I wrote not too long before I consciously realized I had suicidal thoughts for the first time actually. But this sort of shows where it starts and where it's going. If I was dead, then I would be unsure if I would hate the things I'd see. Never did I intend to go, never imagined to lie so low, never expected that which was ahead, never wanted to lie crying in my bed. Black clouds from I know not where, appear in the dark, and the air suddenly lies heavily on my soul. My mind turns to a piece of coal burned to ashes in the endless fire, which, like a never-ceasing lyre, whispers stories into my ear, the like which I never dreamt to hear. I know not what, know not why, but it is like with a blade that my flesh is cut. A dripping pain runs in my heart, a bloody gain I strangely welcome with a smile. For a lovely but too short while, I forget everything, before all comes over me again and I fall deeper than before, so I don't know where to, or if I want to go. If I was dead, I couldn't choose if in the end I did really win or lose. So here we are, all the criteria discussed. Naturally, these are only like sort of the main characteristics of BPD and what people with BPD go through. There are many more facets to this mental illness, and BPD is certainly something that usually or very often occurs alongside other mental illnesses, which, for example, in my case, are depression and social anxiety. But I think that BPD still bears sort of a stigma that it's, the disorder that makes you go crazy, that has you go mad, that makes you very manipulative and that sort of thing, which isn't true at all. Because people with BPD, they feel so much stronger than the regular person does. Sure, we get angry and we maybe hate, but we also enjoy and love in such strong ways. And you learn to live with it. You go through your life, and if you're lucky, you're able to talk to a therapist. Maybe you also take medicine, and it can get better. You adjust to it. I'm not saying I'm cured or I don't struggle. Naturally, I struggle. Of course, I struggle. I struggle every day, and I'm not over it. And I know that I, at some point, will need to get back into therapy, and I need to deal with my problems. But I'm hoping that this sort of helps to raise awareness and makes things a little more clearer and easier to understand for people who maybe have heard of BPD but don't actually know what it is. And since I very much usually like talking about movies and TV shows on this channel, that there are occasional instances where BPD gets shown on screen, not always in the best of ways. I know that there is, for example, the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I unfortunately haven't seen in full yet. I started watching it, but haven't continued yet for some reason. But I know that the main character in that show is actually diagnosed with BPD at some point, and she also very much struggles with these characteristics. And people have said that in general, this is a good representation of BPD, and I, from what I've seen, I feel I can say like, yeah, that's true. Then there is the show BoJack Horseman, which in general is just a fantastic representation of mental illness and what people with, depression, anxiety, etc. go through. And BoJack very much also, while he is not diagnosed with BPD, very much goes through many of these characteristics, especially like mood swings and impulsive behaviour, self-harm, that sort of thing. You very much see this represented in the character of BoJack, and his character has a happy ending as well. So there, as they say, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It isn't all bad, and I hope that this kind of video, this kind of awareness, and these stories I talk about help to raise awareness and understanding for not just BPD but mental illness in general, and that there are many people out there who struggle with all different kinds of things, and it's normal and it's okay, and you should talk about it. You should definitely go and talk about it to a therapist, to your friends, to your family, someone, to your pet. I don't care. It's okay to get stuff out. It's okay to talk about it, and I think it's important to be open about this. This shouldn't be something you're ashamed of. It really shouldn't be, because it's a human condition. We all struggle, and some of us struggle a bit more extreme than others, I guess. So, God, I've been talking for such a long time. Thank you for making it this far. Thank you for watching. I hope it wasn't too much of a downer. I hope it was sort of educational and informative. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done already. If there are any questions about what I talked about in this video, about BPD, mental illness, whatever, put it down in the comments below. I happily answer any questions you have. I might also do a follow-up video if there's something specifically you want me to talk about, or you want to hear more of my experiences or whatever. Just tell me down in the comments below. I read everything you put there. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.